Thanks for having me. Obviously, going to talk about sustainability in the future of design education, not the historical perspective we've been talking about. And it was part of this project called the Future of Design Education. The URL is just futureofdesigneducation.org. And the goal of this was to create a bunch of manifestos on what design education should be. Not just sustainability, but in terms of design methods and services and PhD, like doctoral education in design and systems and all sorts of other stuff. And it was mostly organized by Don Norman, whose book I'm sure you know, as well as some people at IBM like Carl Freudenberg. And there were actually two other Delft faculty involved, Peter Jan Stoppers and Gary Kortuum. The project overall did not create the big splash that I was hoping it would, but we did come out with a few papers that are these manifestos on what design education should be. And so for the sustainability group in here, we tried to assemble a really good team that would have good diversity representing the whole globe and different aspects. Didn't quite manage that, did get people from Europe and UK, North and South America and Australia. Did not directly get anyone from Africa, India, or China, although we did get people from those places as reviewers. So we at least had some input from those areas. Decent gender balance. We did have a good mix of both academia and industry professionals, and as well as the less technical industrial design side, as well as the more technical engineering design side. And the result was this paper that's just a normal academic paper in Sheiji, but it's definitely more a manifesto in terms of the verbiage in it, which you'll see in a minute. And we were not talking about the future of education in terms of a roadmap of different things happening over time. We pretty much just have one vision of stuff that people should already be teaching now, but will hopefully move forward and teach in the future everywhere, because it takes time for design curricula to change. But these are the things that should be taught going forward. And so we started out with the core ideas. That's the manifesto part. And it's also just a set of curricular topics, or sorry, curriculum areas. And then within each one of those, there are a bunch of subtopics that get very specific at different levels, which I'll talk about in a second. And then for each of these core ideas or curriculum areas, there's a list of resources that people can use as educators to actually teach this stuff. And so the curriculum areas are fundamentals of sustainability, circular economy, whole systems thinking, sustainable innovation strategies, which means green design tools and methods, basically, impact assessment, laws and standards, and then communication, collaboration, and leadership. And you might not think that sustainable design education should be about collaboration and leadership, but we actually decided, and I had found in previous research as well, that this is actually really important because no one in sustainable design can accomplish an entire product or service on their own. You know, we all need manufacturers, we need material suppliers, we need business people to invest, we need marketing people, et cetera, et cetera. So because we can't do this alone, we really need the skills of collaborating in teams and, you know, the leadership to get the buy-in and the funding and the resources. And communication and collaboration is also important because this work is hard. And so it taxes people a lot. And you need to be really supportive of your team and yourself to be able to keep going and to be effective. So This is an often neglected part of the process. And so for each of these curriculum areas, like I said a second ago, we talk about particular curriculum topics at 3 different levels. There's the level that we think all design students should be taught, and then the level that all sustainable design specialists should be taught, but not everybody needs to know that. And then there's the more elective and advanced stuff. So as an example, for the level of detail that we're talking about in just one of these curriculum areas, I'll take you through everything that we have on that one curriculum area. So for fundamentals of sustainability, this is the manifesto part of the text. We say, all humans depend on nature and are part of it. All products and services require materials and energy that come from nature and must safely return to it. Thus, without sustainable design, there will be no other fields of design. So that's us getting manifesto-y. And I'm not going to read all of these to you, but basically it's things like, instead of saying that there's a triple bottom line that we should balance, we say economics depends on society, which depends on the environment. So that's putting a much more clear hierarchy there. And all designers must take responsibility for their decisions, which impact these interdependent systems, even when the effects are unintentional. So again, that's something that all designers need to know, is that whether or not they intend these consequences to happen, they do happen. And it's our responsibility as designers. And et cetera, going down to these other aspects like social justice and life cycle thinking. So, okay, so that was the manifesto part for fundamentals of sustainability. And then there's the actual curriculum topics, which up here is the stuff that all designers should know. Like, all designers should know that there is some definition of environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. And they should know what planetary boundaries are and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, et cetera. And then there are things that sustainable design specialists should know about natural resource extraction limits and issues, you know, like what's a critical raw material and what's non-critical, things like that. That these impacts happen across life cycle stages and like ecosystem cycles, like the carbon cycle or the water cycle. Diversity and inclusion in design practice, not just as a general concept up above. And then more specific things like donut economics is a nice thing, but maybe not everybody needs to do that. So that can be an elective or an advanced thing, et cetera. And then there's more detail on all of these things. So for each one of these topics, we have a couple sentences on what it is. So the top group here has more detail that you can see written out. So this is the same thing that I read a second ago, but then the rest of the text explains what we mean by that. And you'll notice the verbiage that we used here, things like list the definitions, describe the planetary boundaries, recognize which UN SDGs are impacted, blah, blah, blah. So we're using some Bloom's taxonomy language here to clarify the level of understanding that we need. And so in these lower level topics that everyone needs to know, we're using the lower level Bloom's taxonomy things like, you know, you don't need to know how to apply this stuff. You don't need to have a super advanced understanding where you're creating new stuff. You just need to like list definitions or recognize things. So then at the more advanced levels, you do need to be able to apply these things. And so that was part of what we wrote into the verbiage there. And then the last thing that we have for each curriculum topic is resources. So for example, there's a bunch of websites here where you can learn about the planetary boundaries and EU Eco-Design Guide, the Sustainable Development Compass website, Engineering for One Planet, etc. So these are things that you can use in class as readings, and some of them have exercises and things that you can directly drop in as curriculum. Although I do admit that our resources lists are kind of thrown together at the last minute. We could have, I know, I shouldn't say that. Um, but yeah, but it's just a suggestion to get started with. So that's basically it for one of these topics. But like I said, we have that same level of detail in all of these topics. And I'm not going to go through all of those in detail, but I'll at least just show you briefly what some of the topics are within each of these. And I'm going to finish up. My whole thing should only take 15 minutes, so we should have plenty of time for Q&A after. So for circular economy, we think everyone should be able to think regeneratively rather than linearly, visualize product or service resource flows, where do materials come from, where do they go, have the idea of designing for durability, repair, upgrade, et cetera, like some product service systems. And again, these are just the awareness of the concept. So you'll see that design for extended life, it shows up both here and here. It's because here, they just need to know the concept exists, and here, we want them to actually apply some methods. And yeah, and like regenerative solutions, product service system maps, policy, etc. For whole systems thinking, all designers should know just the general concept that their design decisions have implications in wider systems, not just in the physical product that they're doing. And they should be able to visualize some map of that life cycle. And then for more specific levels, for the sustainable design specialists, we want them to apply these methods like do system mapping, apply systems thinking and design. And then for the more advanced people, like maybe some people will do quantitative system dynamics models where you actually have software and things like that, but not everybody needs to do that. That's a more advanced specific thing. For sustainable innovation strategies, the basic thing that everybody needs to know is just recognize that sustainable design tools and methods exist. I'm very frustrated at how many sustainable design classes in different universities, even today, just apply the normal design thinking or human-centered design while thinking green thoughts. Let's apply our normal design process to feeding people in rural Africa. Like that's kind of a dumb way to do sustainable design. And then people who are actual sustainable design specialists, they learn these actual tools and methods. Like eco-design strategy wheel or behavior change tools, like the FOG method or design with intent or something. And then the more specific topics for the elective and advanced are things like biomimicry, like that's a great thing that can be super powerful. Not everybody needs to know it. Or frugal innovation, similarly, factor 10 engineering. Like these are all great things, but not everybody needs to do them. And then impact assessment, laws and standards. Again, the thing that everybody needs to know is just to be able to read an existing LCA or some other assessment that some other person has done. So you don't need to know how to do LCA yourself, but you need to see an LCA and make decisions based on it. Either set priorities for how you want to improve your design, because you see, oh, the big impacts are here, so let's redesign that part. Or to make choices, I have LCAs of these two different things. This one looks better than this, so let's go with that. And then if you're an actual sustainable design specialist, you should at least be able to do a fast track LCA, a social impact assessment, maybe other things like describing key laws, balancing trade-offs between different kinds of impacts, like an LCA versus an SA 8000 social impact metric. And then for more elective and advanced, doing a full LCA or circularity assessment, et cetera, et cetera. And then for the last one, we actually have a bunch of things that we think all designers should do in communication, collaboration, and leadership, just because these are things that are useful for all designers to have anyway, even if they're not sustainable designers. To have some vocabulary of sustainability, you know, understanding carbon impacts and circularity, things like that, and to recognize that greenwashing is a thing that exists, even if you don't know how to spot it or debunk it yourself. And selling sustainability within a team and having a personal code of conduct. This is going back to that responsibility of the designer in society. Yeah, gathering stakeholder feedback on unintended consequences. Then sustainable design experts should be able to sell sustainability to external teams as well, like not just your boss, but your clients and or other partners up and down your supply chain, for example. And organizational change and change management, you know, how do you drive your organization over the long term to fund sustainability and change the way they design things or produce things? And then more elective and or advanced, you know, how do you debunk greenwashing, maybe through LCA or other investigative reporting or things like that. And yeah, so those are it for the curriculum topics. Obviously, there's more detail in the paper. And then just wanted to mention two other related initiatives that are not part of this. One is a research roadmap for sustainable design tools and methods that some of us came up with a few years ago. So me and folks from Chalmers, Bleckingen Institute of Technology, University of Illinois, Ford Motor Company, and Kwantlen Polytechnic in Canada. So part of this, you know, most of this is about how can we improve sustainable design tools and methods so that companies actually use them and they are actually effective in making change in the real products and services that people design. But then one of these four tracks was more about how we take existing things that we know and get them better integrated into industry. And that was very much about education and like how we train people both professionally and in higher education about this stuff. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention is the Engineering for One Planet initiative, mostly centered in the US, run by the Lemelson Foundation. Their system is not as much of a manifesto as our Future of Design education. It's much more moderate, but it has a lot more momentum behind it because they've done a much better job of making it a movement and not just making it a manifesto. So they've had a much broader network. So I'm a much smaller percentage of this work because they've had more than 100 people involved. And they've had faculty and students and administrators, as well as industry designers and executives and government officials and nonprofits involved. And because it's been so big, there's been a lot more co-creation, and it's been a much longer term process that continues to this day. And so they have their own list of curriculum topics that they think is very important. It's basically the same stuff that I talked about, but there's more, there's a little more emphasis on some of the business aspects of things. Yeah, they have their own list of recommended curriculum, and this work continues to happen. So that is it. What questions do you have?